Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're jumping into a fascinating online discussion. It all started with what seems like a simple question, but it ended up taking apart one of the world's greatest mysteries, the Loch Ness Monster.
And you know, this one question just lit up a whole conversation. The answers that came back, they don't just unravel a monster story. They get into the how and why we create myths in the first place. All right, let's get into it.
Okay, first up, the prehistoric survivor theory. This is the classic image of Nessie, right? The one we all kind of have in our heads?
I mean, it's such a cool idea, isn't it? A creature that's lost in time, just hanging out in this remote Scottish loch. But right off the bat, the online discussion started poking holes in two really big parts of this theory.
And this is where the story starts to bump up against some, hard scientific facts. It all begins with a pretty basic question. What is this creature supposed to be anyway?
So right away, we have to clear up two huge misconceptions. A user named Pondicherrii pointed this out really well. First, we tend to lump plesiosaurs in with dinosaurs, but they're not dinosaurs at all. They were their own separate group of marine reptiles. And second, this idea that they were cold-blooded, well, a lot of evidence actually suggests they were warm-blooded, which means they'd have been totally fine in cold water. So, kind of surprisingly, the chilly water in Loch Ness, probably not the biggest issue. But the real problem, the one that's almost impossible to get around, well, that's buried deep in the ground. Think about it.
If a whole population of these giant marine reptiles somehow survived the extinction event that wiped out the dinosaurs 66 million years ago, we would absolutely 100% expect to find some fossil evidence between then and now.
And here it is, 0. That's the number of plesiosaur fossils found in the last 66 million years. Not one. For a big animal like that to leave absolutely no trace for that long, well, like one person in the thread said, the probability is as close to 0 as can be. So what does that mean? It means if Nessie is a real animal, it's pretty much guaranteed not to be a plesiosaur.
Okay, but let's play devil's advocate for a second. Let's forget the fossil record. Let's say one did survive all this time. The next question is, could it even live in Loch Ness?
Well, the people in the discussion pointed out 4 massive problems with the loch itself. First, the loch isn't ancient. It was gouged out by glaciers only about 10,000 years ago. Second, the food. There just isn't enough fish in there to feed even one big predator, never mind a whole family of them. That brings us to population size. A single animal can't live for centuries, right? So you need a breeding population. And since they were air breathers, they'd be coming up for air all the time. We would see them, no question. Yeah, a user named Extra Medium just nailed it. A breeding population of these things would be so big, it wouldn't be a mystery, it'd be a well-known species. They'd probably be serving Loch Ness burgers to tourists. So that leads to the big question. If it's not a real animal, then what on earth is it? And this is where the conversation gets really interesting, because it pivots away from biology and dives deep into folklore to uncover what might be the real story behind Nessie. The idea that came up is that Nessie isn't a hoax. It's something way more fascinating. It's a cultural phenomenon, a story that's been changing and evolving for a very, very long time. One user broke it down into this brilliant 4-step process. So, step 1, it starts as old folklore. Stories of Kelpies or water spirits, which were basically tales to warn kids and adults about how dangerous the water is. Step 2, as science becomes a bigger deal, people start looking for natural explanations instead of supernatural ones. Step 3, the story gets a modern makeover. The water spirit becomes a real animal, a surviving prehistoric creature. And then, step 4, this is the magic part. Our own brains do the rest. We see something we can't explain, a weird wave, a log, maybe a swimming deer, and our brain fills in the blank with the monster we're already primed to see. And that's why the sightings feel so genuine to people. They are seeing something real. It's just that the local story gives them a ready-made and, let's be honest, a much cooler explanation for what that something is. So in this sense, Nessie isn't real in a biological way, but in a cultural way. And that's just as powerful, maybe even more so. So, what's the big takeaway from all of this? The whole story of Nessie is just a perfect example of how we as humans build these amazing stories to explain things we don't understand. We take old warnings and we spin them into modern legends. And that kind of leaves us with one final big question to think about. What modern myths are we creating right now to make sense of the mysteries in our